let's now talk to one advocacy group that has its boots on the ground when it comes to sexuality education. We are speaking to the executive director of Palawan-based Roots of Health, Amina Evangelista Swanepoel. Welcome to the big story, Amina. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks so much for having me.
This is obviously a very heavy topic, but first let's put into context. Roots of Health is an advocacy group. Tell us all about it. When did you start, and what are you trying to do here?
Sure. So, we are a reproductive health organization. We have been around for 15 years and we've been based in Puerto Princesa, but also have been doing some work outside of Palawan. And our goal has always been to improve reproductive health. And the three main issues that we've been working on are maternal deaths, unplanned pregnancy, especially teen pregnancy, and reducing HIV. And so the main way that we have done this is through providing comprehensive sexuality education to young people in schools, in communities, online, and coupling this with access to clinical services, as well as helping our government stakeholder partners to improve their services. And we've really been so happy with how our work has gone because actually in the last few years in Puerto Princesa City, the teen pregnancy rate has gone down by 60% actually. So this is quite significant. So kumbaga, we have proof of concept. We can show that having this holistic mix of information and services and support for our government partners, it really works. And CSE, or Comprehensive Sexuality Education, is a huge component of this and something that is very, very important to us. And I just wanted to say I'm so happy that this story that you started with the story of Jane and Jet, because I think with all of the misinformation that's being spread right now, with all the controversy, with all the drama, I think we're losing sight of the problem, which is teen pregnancy, which continues to be a huge problem. There are so many young people like Jane and Jet, and we really need to implement comprehensive sexuality education so that we can protect young people so that they do not end up as young parents like this couple that you featured.
Amina, in how long have you guys been doing this advocacy? Because that 60% decline in the teenage pregnancy rate in Palawan, that's a huge number. So I just want to know over how long that happened and like what are the steps you took? Like how many years is the program of sex ed that you implement to these children for you to be able to see the results?
Yeah, well, so this kind of impact takes a long time. So we've been doing it for 15 years, and it's only in the last few years that we've actually started seeing that number decline. And this is why we've always said, even during the debates for the RH law, when people were looking for a silver bullet, when they're looking for that one thing that is going to solve the problem, we kept saying, no, it doesn't work that way. This is a very complex issue. There are so many factors that go into this. So you really have to be holistic in your approach, and you really have to be able to tackle a lot of different issues. And so what we've done, basically before the pandemic, we were teaching a lot in public high schools all over Puerto Princesa City and all over Palawan. In fact, up until about 2019, at the end of 2019, we had taught 100,000 young people. Because of the pandemic, we had to pivot, and so we created a lot of materials for online consumption. And a little bit later on, we actually had a project with DOH and Commission of Population and Development to create a Tagalog website that is geared for young people and written in young people's language, the slang that they use, all in Tagalog with beautiful artwork. And that is the I Choose campaign that DepEd is also still using. It's malayaako.ph, and it's a great website. So we've complemented teaching kids in schools as well as in communities. Since the pandemic, we focused a little bit more on communities. It's a little bit easier to gather young people there. But it is comprehensive sex ed, whether information online or in person, has to be coupled with accessibility of services. And then it also, we have to bring our government partners along with us on this road because otherwise it's not sustainable. So we've done a lot of training teachers, training barangay health workers in how to provide young people with adolescent friendly services.
Amina,
there's a lot of concern over the bill. I mean, we talked about disinformation or misinformation going around. What is the age that you start educating the young kids about comprehensive sexual education? Do you have a separate class for it, or is it integrated into subjects? We do know that it's already part of the DepEd curriculum. It's supposed to be integrated in different learning areas. And tell us a little bit about the name of your website, Malaya Ako.
Sure.
There are the parents have apprehensions about this, about rights, about freedoms, and how this is explained to the young kids.
Sure. So it's a bit of a range in terms of the age, but we would start teaching in schools for grade 7 and 8. So that was the youngest. There was a time that we did some grade 6 work, but it was mostly on self-esteem. But then generally we have a puberty module that's intended for grade 7 and 8. And then for grades 9 and 10, there's a reproductive health module that dives a little bit deeper into, contraception. How does it work? How does pregnancy happen? And then for grade 11 and 12, it's more detail on the basics of reproductive health, as well as more information on HIV and life choices and relationships. And we did this because, as Senator Hontiveros and other advocates have been stressing, comprehensive sexuality education is age appropriate. You don't give all the information to all the kids all at once. So you give just the right amount for their age group, for the things that they're dealing with and thinking about. And that's why we start with puberty. And that's the changes in body that kids are going through, getting periods, things like that. And it is just really important to keep stressing that it's age appropriate, and we're not going to be teaching children things that aren't appropriate for them. The website that I mentioned, it's Malaya Ako, because the campaign is I Choose. And if you look at the website, it's focused on a lot of different subject areas. And so there is stuff about growing up, and so that's puberty. There's stuff about reproductive health, pregnancy, HIV, but then there's also a big component about mental health, about friendships, about how to navigate those things. And because it was created during the pandemic, there's also some information on COVID and just staying healthy. So it's very much appropriate with what kids are going through, but it also can be a tool for parents, actually. So parents who are concerned about what their kids are learning, I do understand that. I'm a parent myself, but I think what's important to keep stressing is that comprehensive sexuality education in schools is not going to take away anything from a parent teaching their child. And if it spurs a parent to teach their child earlier than they might have, that's probably a good thing, because the earlier that you start talking to your kids about sexuality, the less shame there'll be about it, the more likely kids will open up to their parents. Because right now, if a parent suddenly just tries to talk to their child when they're 16 or 17 and, to sit down to have the talk, if they've never talked about this before, it's going to be so awkward. And most young people do report that they don't really talk to their parents about this because it's not something that they've grown up with.
I think we
so
can
that's
all
another
agree.
important thing.
Yeah.
None of us want to talk to our parents about that stuff. It's just like
Exactly.
the last person you want to ask is your mom. But
Right.
can we step back though, and why do we have to legislate CSE to begin with? Like you said, DepEd, it's already in the curriculum. Public schools, private schools. How important is a law on CSE or comprehensive sex ed, really? And do we really need this?
Sure. Well, because of the RH bill, we've already had comprehensive sexuality education in the law, and it was deemed constitutional by the Supreme Court. But the problem is that implementation has been really spotty. So in some places, it has maybe been implemented very well. In other places, maybe half-heartedly. In some others, not at all. And so one of the things that the bill was trying to do was basically standardize this and make it more, standardize it, have it be the same so that no child is disadvantaged based on whether their particular school or province is being headed by someone who's more conservative and who doesn't want them to have that education. It calls for both private and public schools to implement this. I know that there is some overlap in terms of what was already there, but this new bill was trying to basically strengthen the areas that were basically gaps in the reproductive health law. So if I mean, hopefully this will eventually pass, especially when people realize that they're really getting upset over things that don't even exist in the bill. But there is already a provision for comprehensive sex ed, and it is a step in the wrong direction if we're now trying to remove this completely, because as we've said, this teen pregnancy continues to be a problem, and the longer that there's these issues and some kids are not getting it, the more at risk they will be. And it is important, the government is a duty bearer for this, because not all children can get this from their parents. So we can't say leave it to the parents, because what about the kids who are in abusive households,
Right.
or in households where the parents are absent, or even just a very loving household, but one in which the parent doesn't know about this or doesn't feel comfortable? If they don't get that information, then they are at risk for having an unplanned pregnancy.
Right. So the bill really is about ensuring access to knowledge for all, not just the ones, who are lucky enough to be in regions where sexuality education is good. But also, what did you make of the fact that one of the more contentious wordings turned out to be based on international standards, which a lot of people got up in arms about? From what you've seen, does that have any basis at all?
No, not at all. International law is not something that this isn't even a law, right? I mean, this is a guideline, but anything with the UN agencies and things, they're just suggestions. The Philippines is a sovereign nation. No other country or entity can force us to do something that we don't want. And Senator Ontiveros has even taken that out, and just because it's not actually that important to what the bill is trying to do. It was simply to show that there are international guidelines, because there's so much research that has gone into this. And sayang naman if we don't use the gains from research and from experiences of other countries that lead to these guidelines. These are recommendations of best practices, but they're very clear that you pick and choose. You pick what is appropriate for your culture, you pick what is appropriate for your situation. And if it's not something that matches what your students need, what your learners need, then you don't use it. So that's something
Amina,
that Senator, yeah.
I'm
Sure.
very curious about your discoveries on the capacity of teachers to be able to educate, to communicate this to the kids, because we do know we do quite have a relatively conservative culture across the country. What have your findings been?
Sure. We have trained about 6,500 teachers in how to teach comprehensive sex ed, and they are all scared. They're really scared to do this, because that's part of the reason why CSE hasn't been implemented as it should have been since the RH bill became a law. The teachers have not been equipped, and not everyone has been trained. So teachers, because we have to remember that we have generations of Filipinos who have not had any sex ed. So teachers haven't had sex ed, and parents haven't had sex ed. And the fear that most adults have is that the young people they're talking to know more than they do.
Right.
And the teachers especially are so scared that they're going to lose control of the classroom, because the kids are going to be like lewd, it's going to be bastos, they're
Right.
going to be like bringing up things that
Yeah.
that completely derail.
Yeah.
In fact, that hasn't really happened.
Yeah.
But that's the fear.
Yeah.
So teachers
Yeah.
definitely need that support so that they have more confidence in teaching the materials.
Lots of